thank you guys for attending my first inaugural panel. As a moderator, nonetheless, I just found out from my guest speakers here, my panelists, that that's not how things are done, so that's great. I'm Elsie. I'm VP of Partnerships at Adopter Media. We are a performance-focused brand agency. We are media buyers, putting brands in the spotlight in the audio podcast space. So I want to give you guys a little bit of context, but before I intro the team here today, the panel, and we can all vote real quick. Do we say niches or niches?
Niches.
Great. So Riches to Niches, it's the name of our panel today. We're really toying around with the idea of what is the niche that we're trying to address here. And what we really discovered was the podcast industry is a niche within the advertising industry itself. I mean, spend represents less than 1% of all digital advertising in podcasts in 2026. So we really are like the smallest little fraction, right? But it's an industry that's been built off of the idea of a niche in and of itself, right? So what I want to do is have you guys introduce yourselves briefly and tell us all the most niche thing you're into. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. I'm Chris Peterson, VP Business Development at Reznick Ventures. We are a company that works with top creators to help them build out podcasting businesses, digital businesses. We're part of 2B Media Group and Fox.
And the most niche thing you're into.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if it's niche or not, but I still listen to the same pop punk playlist that I listened to in like 2001 and never changes.
Respectful. So you're going to the Spotify Beach concert tomorrow night?
Have to.
Amazing.
Mike Reznick, I'm the president and COO of SoundStack. And the most niche thing, he threw a little curveball at us. Well done.
Sorry, guys.
Well done. I'm going to say I have a very strange obsession with cutting trees.
Oh, wow.
How's that? On the listening side, I love car racing.
Okay.
And my dream is to actually race a car one day, but that's getting less and less likely.
You didn't do it as a teen? Just get out there? No?
Two answers in one.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Bob.
The cutting down trees or cutting tree branches? Trimming trees. Okay, interesting. Hi, I'm Billy Hartman. I'm the head of revenue for Art19. Art19 is the hosting business that Amazon owns. I look after our demand business and the supply acquisition side of the business as well for creators and publishers alike. And I've had at least a few seconds to think about this question, and I still don't know how to answer it. I think this used to be niche maybe, but I like to build Legos with my kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm really happy that they've matured away from like the big ones into the littler ones now, so that's fun.
They've made a resurgence, for sure.
I mean, big time. Like
That
you could
counts
spend
too.
a fortune on Legos, so yeah.
I'll be
There you
the
go.
only one to list a niche that's podcast related. My husband and I were super into the Blue Jays, actually, and I say this is a niche in the podcast space only because there's got to be like 2 or 3 podcasts in a sea of thousands of podcasts about sports teams dedicated to the Jays. I think this is super untapped potential because the Blue Jays is one team for an entire country of Canada. And you don't compete so much with much smaller segmented audiences like you do with baseball teams in the States. So I think that's something that really should blow up a little bit more as we see MLB content grow in the podcasting space, or with John Boy's partnership with the MLB. So that can kind of get us into one of the first questions that I have for you guys today, which is about the audience interest. So I wanted to point out one of the ways that podcasts build off of being a niche. You don't have to have the highest number of listeners. You have to have the biggest dedication to a specific topic. So I actually wanted to kick this off with Chris and have you talk a little bit more about how creators have excelled and succeeded in the space by focusing and going deeper into their specific topic, their niche, their passion.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you can see it all the time with, social influencers who have a crazy reach across Instagram or TikTok. And there's really not an engagement in a lot of those that goes deeper than that, just sort of quick interaction. With the podcast space, all the data shows us that the engagement from a dedicated audience is much better than other mediums. And so there's a few examples that I think I can point to. One of being TBPN, who, kind of was the biggest show, at least from optics, but really was only reaching 100,000 people per day, but it was reaching the right audience of, Silicon Valley CEOs and tech pros, and then they sold their company for $100 million to OpenAI. They had a deep engagement, but they didn't have a huge scale. On the other side, we work with Crime Junkie, who does have a very large scale, especially for the podcast space, where the audio is, 2-3 billion impressions a year. They also have YouTube. We're working with them to help grow the YouTube side, but then also move their audience to Tubi and fast channels. And then they're doing touring, they're doing merchandise, they have a fan club. And so I look at that and say, yes, it is a very big podcast, and it would be, anyone in the podcast industry, if I say it's niche, would, kind of give me a little bit of pushback, maybe rightfully so. But it's niche when you look at everything else that we're talking about here at Cannes. It's very niche programming still, but they have a super dedicated audience that is hyper-focused on Ashley Flowers and Crime Junkie, and they have built a flywheel to then launch new programming, move them, generate more revenue. And so that's a really great example, I think, of how you should do it, and to tap in and continue to just build that loyalty with your engaged audience.
100%. On that topic, how are we helping from more of the platform and tech side? How are we helping creators to do that, go cross-platform, or create multiple content streams and then monetize that?
I think so. SoundStack is a technology company in the podcast space where we take that show, that creator from hosting, all the analytics they need, through to their ad monetization. I think we as an industry need to enable all the paths that creator is going to need, right? Even if the show it originates as an audio show, we're seeing what's happening with video, right? We're seeing that now we need a big video presence. It's going to be more than that, right? We're going to need to enable every social outlet that creator has, and for the companies that can build the tech that could make it easy, because right, it's about producing your show and then being super relevant immediately, and that's what we need to do. So I think we're doing a nice job on the video front. I'm sure there's probably some great technology out there that's doing it socially too. We're focused on the audio and video of it.
And also to jump on that, we acquired a company called Supercast earlier this year that allows creators to build a subscription business off of audio and video. And so I think that's another really great way of we saw our creators were building subscription businesses, so we thought we should actually bring that in-house to not only offer them a solution that will help them generate more revenue and tap into that engaged audience, but also invest in it and help them build even more technology to support as this industry grows and changes, because where will it be in 2 years, right? We're trying to prepare for that.
This is a totally selfish question. How can I put ads in so for everyone else's context, when we say someone's now a subscriber, the creator typically frames that as, oh, you subscribe and then you don't have to see so many ads because now you're supporting my channel directly. I don't need the sponsors to be supporting my channel. But if you're now subscribed as an advertiser, that's who I want to reach the most, because you care the most about what that host thinks, eats, does, wears, right, consumes. So are you currently working with advertisers within this? I'm thinking Substack, Patreon, I've seen ads there, I've seen products linked there. What's that look like?
Yeah, so I think it's a misconception when people hear premium or subscription that it has to be ad-free. That's kind of the easy sort of layup. Of course, most of our creators, that's their first thing they do, or they do windowed content. But yeah, when we look on it as a whole, we're seeing like 5% of an audience move over to subscription. It can be as high as 25%. It obviously can be a lot lower if you don't have the right messaging. But 5% of the most loyal of your audience is willing to pay you $5, 20, 100, whatever. Totally agree. That's an opportunity for advertisers to come in. I think it has to be a completely different ad read, a different experience. But there's a lot to be done with that, and we're constantly exploring that because these users, they just want to be more engaged with the host. And an advertisement, as I'm sure you've seen, and you can probably speak to it better, isn't a negative thing necessarily with podcast audience.
Yeah, I mean, now might be a good time to mention, just because we were speaking about Crime Junkie, true crime does very well with pet brands. And we can't figure out why for the longest time. Like, why is there such a strong... It doesn't matter what true crime show. If I'm dropping a dog food ad, it's selling. What's going on? We look deeper, and right now we can only get like anecdotal signals, but a large amount of research shows that high female audience consuming true crime content, a lot of what messaging they're receiving in true crime content is protect yourself, be more aware of your surroundings. Nothing better than having a dog that barks and wakes the whole house up if there were to be an intruder, right? So there's actually, if you then look at pet ownership and women in the United States, they over-index as pet owners. And so that's where we get the perfect marriage of like a brand that makes sense, that they want to hear about, and content that resonates with them in their lifestyle. So like that's the dream that we're all chasing, right? So we can then kind of toss it to Bill, because I want you to be able to speak a little bit more about, we talked a little bit about like content niches. Now we're speaking a little bit more about reaching audiences based on things that are not traditionally measurable like demographics would be, right? Like interests or consumer behavior even. So that's also very unique to podcasts in a lot of ways. What do you have to tell us about reaching specific niches, more like from a audience interest standpoint?
Niches, not niches, right?
Niches for riches.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the benefits or the unique, I'd say, opportunities that Amazon has is that most people have used Amazon for some reason to buy something or to research something, or who knows. We have a whole plethora of kind of businesses that Amazon owns. So we have some amount of data about you most likely as a person, as a listener. And so our ability to use that data to then target you based on whatever that is could be as niche as you just looked up some shoes and you live in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's Thursday and it's 97 degrees out. We should give you an ad for flip-flops. Just making that up. I know you don't live in Phoenix, Arizona. So the ability to use data to go super niche and go super targeted, I think, is really, really compelling in the space. And as podcast networks grow and have more supply across thousands and thousands of podcasts, you can imagine how you can now get very specific and very targeted with how you reach the exact person that you want to reach at the exact moment that you want to reach them. And we launched something recently, the Amazon ad tag, which has been around, but we are now deploying the Amazon ad tag within podcasting as well. So we can actually track a conversion back to a purchase on Amazon.com, which is quite cool for any advertiser that cares about that, right? If you're not just top of the funnel and you want to get all the way down to bottom of the funnel, the ability to do that is quite compelling. So I think the way in which we deploy data ultimately to get super targeted is very niche in our world in terms of the podcast hosting business.
100%. And something like that really plays to the advantage of super small shows. Like we're continuing to talk about these niches, and we know podcasters. I was hoping you guys would list a few when I asked you, what's the most niche thing you're into. But we all know podcast shows that have maybe 5,000 listeners a month. Like that's almost too small for traditional networks to want to take that on and to represent them in sponsorship deals. It's also hard for advertisers to read a signal off of that. But some of the things that Bill's mentioning, like that we can actually turn around and help creators to monetize, right? So, Mike, I don't know if you wanted to get a little bit more into helping those niche creators stay niche. They don't have to have those billion listeners per year like Crime Junkie, right? They can stay small, stay dedicated to their topic, but monetize.
Let's just say it helps, right? If you have 1 million listeners, but we've established, right, that podcast listener is a super dedicated, passionate, leaned in sort of listener, and so it's about the show, sure, and maybe the genre and the selling dog food, but it's also about finding that audience wherever they might be, and that audience could be listening to a show with 5,000 downloads, but that shouldn't keep that show from being able to, drive revenue, because they have the ability to, they have a great audience there. And so as you target advertising based on audience, and that's where programmatic comes in, and that's where, brand suitability, like Barometer's in the house here, so a quick shout out to them. But you have a lot of different technology that helps you find that audience, and the attribution that goes with that. You're able to extend your reach. So now, as a network, you might have a cap of what you're able to sell, right? You have a finite amount of supply. Chris is only going to run a certain amount of, breaks, commercials, ads.
We hope. We can't be doing the 21 ads in an episode.
So now, how do you expand? How do you get a larger piece of budget? Or I should say, increase the budget for all of us. We find more audience. We find that same type of lookalike audience that will also buy dog food, but they might be listening somewhere else. And the benefit to a small show is that they can still participate in ad revenue, even if they're not large enough to have a direct sales team. And I'll throw one more sort of spin on that. There's a lot of networks that have small shows, and it's harder to monetize those shows because they don't have the same numbers. Well, then there's a way to use reach extension or lookalike show extension to then put together a network of, even more car racing podcasts. So now it becomes scale. Now the brands want to buy it because now you've just served something up that is worth buying.
I think you're in a pretty unique position if you are a truly niche podcast that is hyper, specific about some specific topic, where yes, maybe you've kind of shrunk the amount of advertisers that perhaps you could speak to. You could be very specific to the advertisers that you can speak to. So you get this really authentic opportunity to connect with brands in a way that maybe a much larger podcast doesn't always, have the opportunity to do is quite as much, because they are trying to appeal to, millions of people. I'd say probably one of the things for any creator or anybody that's kind of niche is diversification of ways in which you also monetize your brand or monetize your podcast. So if you build the base with some sort of programmatic revenue through something like an Art19, which is us, when you also take a layer beyond that, so you're doing host reads, and a layer beyond that you're doing social and video, etc. I think now it's all about diversification of revenue streams as well as diversification of content beyond just the podcast itself. So I think as a little niche podcaster, you do podcasts, right? Am I making that up?
Do I make podcasts?
Don't you have a podcast? Am I making that up?
No.
Never mind. Take it back.
Adam has his Kendama pod. If you want to talk about niche, we can talk about my coworker Adam with his Kendama podcast. So.
Okay. Well,
1,000 listeners.
Then Adam needs to diversify revenue, but also diversify content across, his brand.
But
I'm
actually,
getting sweatier and sweatier as I sit here, by the way.
We're wrapping real soon. We have one round of questions, but you brought up a great piece of advice for a podcast host that I want to actually flip back to Chris briefly, because as a personal fan of Crime Junkie, I know that they have the big show, we call it, but then they also have the deck. And do you want to tell a quick story of why the deck evolved? Because that is a smaller show by far. The listenership is smaller, but they brought the audience interest in a different direction. So I'm curious if we can tell hosts, like, it's okay to be niche. It's also okay to start other shows that address other topics.
Yeah, so look, Ashley Flowers, the host of Crime Junkie, again, massive podcast, created the deck as a way to dive deeper and really unfold, a crime and peel back that onion. But they've also launched a bunch of other shows as part of the Audio Chuck network, and they've brought in other hosts. It's really interesting because Ashley literally just listens to all of these on constant search for a true crime podcast, and then we'll just like randomly reach out. And to hear some of these other hosts talk about, like, I had like 100 listeners and I get an email from Ashley Flowers saying, I really like your podcast, keep it up. And now they're part of the Audio Chuck network. It's pretty crazy. But there's Ashley's niche, right? She's very focused on the true crime space, and she's really great at picking out talent. And then she's able to use this umbrella that they've built with the Audio Chuck and Crime Junkie network, where, yes, Crime Junkie is a very large percent of the monthly consumption, but we're seeing growth, and especially as they push into video with all of these shows, that's giving another opportunity to start to see new audience come in on YouTube. We just put the deck on Tubi within the last month. Crime Junkie's been there for the last several months. We're seeing really great growth there. Tubi has a much younger and like multicultural audience, so I really do believe that we're just finding new audience on that platform. But then as we continue distribution, we'll move her audience over and we'll find new audience. So it's just really the ability to build a network and, again, tap into that engaged audience that wanted more Ashley, but then also wanted more true crime that was chosen by Ashley, whether or not they knew that. It was endorsed by Ashley, at least.
One last little side question, because we had spoken about, there's also the idea of like the niche of consumers. People shop where they want to shop, even if they've been introduced to your product and they're a relevant buyer. So what we've spoken about specifically, Bill and I, how can we make it easier for consumers to discover our product wherever, but then buy it in the places that they're most comfortable, which often is Amazon. Like, let's just be real, you guys are the best, but brands, they promote in our ads. It's always, visit blahblah.com/Sarah, get 10% off. But we know naturally there's just so much already moving towards other e-com platforms where it's just easy for consumers to buy. So I'm curious how we can, as podcast advertisers, or even hosts, like, how can we make it easier for people that are getting these ads to buy wherever?
That's a good question. I don't know necessarily how they make it easier. I think it's, well, for Amazon, it's about how do we inform an advertiser that the ad is working. So how do we basically demonstrate, success via some sort of, attribution back to Amazon.com, or using a third party where we can determine somebody went to xyz.com's website so that we at least know that. I think it's about how do we inform the advertiser. I guess for the podcaster themselves, I think there's a lot of different ways that a podcaster can say, hey, this product's available on Amazon.com, this product's available on xyz.com, depending upon, whatever the product is. I think one thing that I've always found exciting about podcasting is beyond just the ads themselves, is for creators to actually speak about products and speak to their experience using a product. I think that can drive tremendous, conversion for whatever the product is. So, it's a good question. I don't know if you guys have any additional thoughts on that. Stumped.
Wouldn't it be cool if sort of response? We know, coming back to data, whether it's Amazon data or other sorts of data that we can gather from identity companies with graphs like ID5, TransUnion, Experian, and things like that. We know where these people shop. You could almost create dynamic creative that then tells you to go to a store by you.
That's
and
so great.
Someone who's in Amazon who really knows who's shopping on Amazon to go to Amazon. But this is just me spitballing up here.
You can do that now too, actually. What that actually requires is, I think, advertisers to become a little more adventurous with their audio creative. I think audio creative has kind of been the host read, a radio ad, or maybe a podcast ad or a streaming ad. But the way in which you do use data to inform creative is definitely exciting. I agree with you, Mike. Great call. Yeah, great call.
That would be. I would put a pretty dollar behind that investment. Let me tell you, that would be great. Okay, so I mean, ending on that note, what do we feel is the biggest niche that's going to blow up in the next 5 years? Like when I see you guys again and we're doing a panel again in another year or two, what are we going to be talking about then?
You got to start this.
In media or just on the planet?
I mean, we could stick to a little bit closer to our
industry. Oh man, was this on the question there?
Yeah, Bill, it was at the bottom of my prep sheet, so.
I made it to the bottom there. Yeah, I mean, for I guess I'm going to speak to what I think is interesting. I think the opportunity to really be kind of 360 in which a brand goes into a niche, right? So how do you really lean in and figure out how do you maximize this opportunity with whether it's a creator or a publisher or a network like us, where you really go deep and think multi-format. So think beyond, again, just audio, think all up. What's the right way in which I lean into this particular niche or this particular data segment and really go multi-format across, which means, video, audio, display, social, etc. I think that, at least I hope in our space, that there's going to be more creative, more efficient ways for advertisers to be able to do that. Because right now it's quite complicated. You have to go most likely to each different place to work with somebody for video, work with somebody for display. And I think podcasting is one of the only mediums right now where you could perhaps go to the creator and work with them across all formats. So how that becomes more simple, more efficient is definitely something I'd keep my eye on.
Excellent.
I could say that I'd still consider the way, Chris says Crime Junkie's big in our world, but in the grand scheme of things, right? Programmatic in audio is still relatively niche compared to the way it's sold in direct sales. And I think that what's going to happen in the next 5 years, hopefully sooner than that, is that we're going to bring more technology to programmatic in a very real way, a very consistent way that allows programmatic to become a niche, let's say, and maybe a much bigger tactic that marketers use, because the data's there, right? The ability to know who's most likely to buy your product and how they bought it, can you resell it to them? Are they similar to this audience that's already bought the product? It's already there. We know that. It's just a matter of having the tools to be able to connect that buyer and seller.
I agree with both of those, and I guess I'll kind of cop out and just say that the combination of that, I think that, as video continues to move to a world where we can have dynamic ad insertion across platforms, obviously audio we're there. I think the 360 approach is going to become more important because people will want to work with the creator more than just like, I just want the audio podcast. We're already seeing that. And so you get to a space where from a direct or a programmatic buy, we're at least on like a level playing field-ish, where right now it feels very, janky. It's a best case scenario. So I think that like that's where we'll get, and that will also allow for more, I'm hyper-focused on this audience. I don't need to have a massive scale for this to be successful once the revenue and the technology is fixed.
Amazing. Well, I mean, does anyone have any questions that they'd want to ask our amazing panelists? Otherwise, I can wrap up for today.
Hi. I thought it was interesting how you were saying how advertisers can potentially show up in interesting spaces. So, for example, the data you're using to find those consumers could be about the time that they listen or the activity they're doing whilst they're listening to that podcast versus the actual content itself. My question for any of you is, have you seen any particularly interesting pairings of advertiser and podcast in terms of its content? Like, it wouldn't be something you would naturally expect?
Should we all go?
So yeah, we can all
Same time?
at the
Yes.
same time.
Okay. Well,
Ashley
here, let me talk
Flowers,
to you about it.
her studio is furnished by Ashley Furniture. So I think that that's a really great way, and especially as they moved into video, for both sides to see success. So that's just a one creative way, and I think that those are the things that are most productive for both sides. When instead of just saying like, "Hey, let's just do the traditional buy," let's actually go in deeper and lean in.
I used to work with Conan O'Brien and his podcast called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend.
Never heard of
And it's a great podcast. You should listen to it sometime. It's definitely a larger podcast. It's not a niche at all. However, there were random brands that used to send, as I'm sitting here drinking a beer, by the way, which is irrelevant to what I'm about to say. He got an ad once for, and if you listen, you may know this ad, but it was for a bidet company that would go on a toilet seat. Actually, you could install it like after the fact. So, after the fact bidet, and he had no idea what he was reading as he started to read the ad. And as he started to read it, he realized, what has my life come to? How has it gotten to the point where I'm sitting here reading a bidet ad? And it wound up becoming 3.5 minutes of the funniest content that I think I've ever heard. I also think Conan's a very funny person, so maybe I'm a bad, sample, but it was hilarious, and he just annihilated this ad in the best way possible. And that advertiser came back time and time again because of what he did with them, and that was a brand that you would have never paired necessarily with the kind of, mainstream brand, that being Conan O'Brien and his friends. So I don't know. I still think fondly about that. Is that a good answer? Is that okay?
The only thing I can say after that is there's no way I'm going to follow the bidet example. So
My microphone's on, you can hear me. I work for advertisers, so I can tell you there's a lot of interesting correlations. For any sort of food, pet food, also like Factor, HelloFresh, it doesn't matter when the ad is served to them. They're not buying your new first purchase, try this trial kit, They're not going to try it until the previous month's subscription of whatever they had has finished. Okay, so you'll see as an advertiser, you're anxious. You're like, oh, this episode just dropped at Crime Junkie. It did amazing. Ash did an amazing read. Paid $1 million for it, whatever. Why am I not seeing all of these sales coming in that week? But then 2 weeks later, when the first of the month hits, which is when a lot of people's subscriptions finish, all the orders start coming. And so you need to go a little bit farther beyond and start measuring these lag points, because you then get to backtrack and you understand to the exact date what's happening on the consumer's day-to-day life. That influences their purchasing, right? If I already have a big bag of dog food, I'm gonna just throw it away. My dog, you're finishing your food before you get the upgrade, So things like that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Hi, I was wondering if you had any experience with direct listener support as opposed to ad revenue, because when I think of really strong engaged communities in podcasting, a lot of them are willing to pay $2, $5, $10 a month to their favorite creators. So I was wondering if you work with any shows who are doing that and what you've seen.
So a lot of our creators do have their own direct-to-consumer subscription business. Supercast, it's what they do. And so, they're working with everyone from This American Life to Crooked Media to launch subscription businesses. For This American Life, Ira very publicly talked about how ad sales revenue had declined on the show and they couldn't keep up with the production costs. And, when they came to the Supercast team, they said something like, hey, we need to replace 10% of our total revenue in the next 6 months. They did it in the first week. And then they came back and said, okay, we need to now replace 25%, and they've exceeded that. So I think that just proves, to your point, they are willing to pay when they really appreciate the content and they're engaged. So there's a million examples like that. But yeah, Supercast, that's the entire thesis.
Can I ask you a question? Supercast, do they offer different tiers then for the creator to kind of select from? Let's say I was a, large podcaster, and I just wanted, a couple dollars entry fee, if you will. But if I was really niche and I wanted to charge maybe a premium because I'm, whatever, I talk about something very niche for the inability to think of something. I guess I'm curious.
So just think of Supercast as the technology that allows you to build your own subscription business, and all the terms and everything are on you. So you can charge 99 cents a month for someone. You can charge, I think Huberman Labs has like $159 annual subscription or something, right? You do whatever you want to do. You can do any type of content. They also have like Ask Me Anything features inside the app. You can implement it directly in your own website to where, like Crooked Media, you don't really know Supercast is there. The cool thing about it, though, from a creator standpoint, is that it's a flat fee per subscriber of 59 cents. And so when you compare that to other rev shares that can be 10, 20, 30% of your total revenue, especially if you're monetizing at that higher clip, that's a lot of revenue that you're just leaving on the table, where for Supercast, it's going to be the same exact cost, whether it's 99 cents or you're charging $1,000 a year. So yeah, it's all on your terms. You own the data, you own the business. You're just using the Supercast technology.